Well, I'll tell you this right now. Tonight was going great, right? I was having a good time watching all the fantasy points rolling in for both sides of the ball. Both teams, they were doing great in fantasy, and watching Jahmyr Gibbs do it, I was in awe of just how good this guy is, and I was so happy to see it because a lot of my best ball teams have Jahmyr Gibbs, and they're doing pretty good right about now. And then I thought about it for a second, and I thought, you know what? I had the opportunity to trade for Jahmyr Gibbs in one of my leagues, and I wanted to trade Christian McCaffrey for Jahmyr Gibbs and a couple other pieces, and I wasn't able to do it. And the problem with that is because my playoffs started this week in that league, which I hate. But now I'm watching someone else reap the rewards of having Jahmyr Gibbs tonight while I have Christian McCaffrey on bye. So then I became a little bit irritated with myself, making that trade not go through. Either way, what a night, man. That was a fun night of fantasy football. It turns out it was a 70-point total when you combine both teams. So this night was great for fantasy football. We're going to break down it all. We're going to give a full recap. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. And to get out with the Dallas Cowboys, I did try to say this over the last several hours. I didn't love Dak in this game as much as I had in previous weeks. And it wasn't because I thought that the Lions were going to make him look like a fool tonight. I just thought about it logically. And I said the Lions actually do have a pretty solid pass rush. So, if they can get after him and they can kind of mess with the timing and the rhythm of the offense a little bit, Dak can get thrown off, and that's typically when you see some Dak turnovers. So he throws 2 picks tonight. One of those picks was at the end of the game. I'll kind of brush that one aside from a Dak analysis perspective, but from a fantasy football perspective, that hurt. Because while he threw 376 yards and a touchdown, he did throw another earlier pick. So 2 picks on the night kind of makes his game not great, not terrible, though, because of the amount of yards that he had. And I think when it comes to Dak, you just kind of have to look at him as a matchup-dependent guy. And I know that sounds tough for a guy who's done really well over the last month. He's had a lot of other good, really dominant games. But the bottom line is Dak is kind of dependent on matchup. And if you put him in a bad situation where he faces a tough pass rush, all it takes is a tough pass rush to throw off your timing of the offense. And I think that's kind of what we saw tonight with Dallas and Dak is, yes, CeeDee Lamb was dominant. He had to exit the game. We'll get more into him in a minute. But, Ryan Flournoy did well. So my point in saying that is to say, I do think Dak, much like a lot of quarterbacks in the league, are timing and rhythm based. And if you throw them off a little bit, you're going to get some bad performances from Dak. And it's not like tonight was bad. I'm just saying bad in his standards. And this was not one of Dak's better fantasy games. Again, it wasn't bad. This is not going to be a terrible game because he threw for almost 400 yards and he threw a touchdown, but it was not one of his most dominant games. Do I think it's indicative of Dak? No. I do think I know what he is, and he's a very high upside player at the end of the day. But I will say also, at the end of the day, Dak is matchup dependent to a certain extent when it comes to hitting a complete massive ceiling game. So we'll just kind of have to take that one week by week, to be honest with you. Javonte Williams, again, continues to do what he does, which is get basically a very consistent 17 to 20 carries on a gamely basis. And tonight he got in the end zone, so you were happy, right? He got 67 yards on 17 carries. That's just under 4 a carry. And he got in the end zone. So it turns out he actually was a solid play this week. And I kind of said this on the running back rankings yesterday. I always kind of toy with the idea of what if I put Javonte lower in my rankings this week? Because the reason I don't usually is because of the fact that I'm like, okay, Javonte is just on a good offense, and he has such a stable workload every single game. But sometimes he doesn't get in the end zone. Sometimes he does. And tonight you're happy because he got in the end zone. But at the same time, he's not much of a receiving back. And it's not always like he's ripping off runs for 20-plus yards. That rarely happens with Javonte. So, he's a ground and pound, churn and burn type of guy, which is good. And I do think he's got that quality to him, kind of like a J.K. Dobbins does. But Javonte Williams gets in the end zone tonight. You're happy about that. Like I said, I would never tell you to outright bench Javonte Williams or anything like that. But I do think some of his fantasy performances leave a lot to be desired because I do think that you could go with other backs who have explosive capability. So then we look at the receiving group, right? And CeeDee Lamb does awesome before he exits. So if you didn't watch this game, CeeDee basically dominated the receiving group. I mean, he was unstoppable tonight. Like, the Cowboys had no answer for him. He caught a sweet, like, just before he left the game, he caught a sweet pass that was clearly pass interference, right? And I do think that he was on pace to have a massive game. Like, I think if he would have been out there this entire game, he would have been possibly 200 yards. I mean, they had no answers for CeeDee. They had no answers. And Dak was, of course, at his best when CeeDee was out there. So, again, not trying to trash Dak tonight or anything like that. But CeeDee Lamb, I do think if he was out there the full game, man, there's no telling what he could have done. I mean, he could have done, honestly, I think he could have gotten 10 for like 200 and maybe a touchdown or two. CeeDee was unstoppable tonight. So what happened, if you didn't watch, is CeeDee went down really, really hard. He landed really hard on, I mean, kind of like his head and shoulder. And he did the, I don't know who noticed this, but I noticed it the first time. And I asked my wife, I was like, did he just do that? So if you remember when Tua has gone down, he's done like, they call it fencing, right? So he does like this with his fingers. And I briefly saw CeeDee do that, and I was like, did he just do that? Like, I had to ask my wife. She was like, I thought he did too. And then I wasn't convinced because then he, like, got up and he was walking off. And it looked like he wasn't moving his left arm. So I was like, maybe it's like a shoulder thing, and he's just, like, really screwed up. So I was telling my wife, I was like, this is bad for fantasy because, I mean, we don't know if this is a long-term injury. This is going to be a huge problem. So then it comes out really quickly after that CeeDee landed on his head and it was a concussion. So, like, he was back in the locker room. And so I was like, okay, he did do that. Because, like, you briefly saw him kind of do the fencing thing with his fingers. It wasn't for, like, but a second maybe. So you could have easily missed it. But, man, I don't know. I mean, I will tell you this. What we've seen from concussions this year is a lot of times, like, I've seen a lot of players – like CJ Stroud, for example, who have missed more than one game coming back from a concussion. So that makes me worried about CeeDee. And the one good thing that we can point to is that his next game is in 10 days. So he has a longer time to rest and to go through the concussion protocol for him to potentially be back for week 15. And obviously, the sooner we can get him back, the better. Because he was about to hit a massive upside game tonight, and it just got taken away from him. But I don't know what to think. I think that it's just hard to tell. Like, concussions are really hard to tell because I know for a fact there's a massive push in the NFL to not let players come back very quickly from a concussion. And it's not like I have inside knowledge. I mean, all you have to do is follow the money. Like, the settlement and the legal stuff they had to go through with the concussion film, that movie that came back like out in the 2010 era, and the CTE stuff, like that stuff they want to avoid, and it's optics they don't want to have pop back up. So I think there's been a massive push over the years in the NFL to really minimize the time that these players come back. Like, they want them to take a longer time to come back from concussions. So it's hit or miss, man. I mean, I really do think CeeDee could come back because of the 10-game stretch, but it would not surprise me at all if he misses a week 15. And if he does miss a week 15, I'm going to be really sad because this guy, oh man, I think we got robbed of a great fantasy night. Like, CeeDee would have been right there with Jahmyr Gibbs as far as top dogs tonight because Pickens wasn't getting it done, and we'll get to him in a little bit. Ryan Flournoy, for those of you who don't know, first of all, if you haven't gotten a subscription at FS Roundup, you need to change your life. And you need to see where my rankings are on a weekly basis. Because if you've been paying attention towards the bottom of my wide receiver rankings every week, there's a guy named Ryan Flournoy who's been slowly climbing up every single week. Now, of course, I wouldn't have been able to pull this one out of a hat and say, yes, this is going to happen, right? Because anytime you've got a healthy CeeDee and a healthy Pickens, Ryan Flournoy, his best case scenario was going to get like 3 for 30. Like, that was basically Ryan Flournoy's best case scenario. But you take CeeDee out, and Ryan Flournoy shows that he's actually a really solid player. So here's the thing. If CeeDee Lamb misses in Week 15, the guy that you need to target immediately is Ryan Flournoy. Because this wasn't just like, I've been watching Ryan Flournoy all season long, and I've always thought of him as a guy who could step in if given more opportunities. Because he took Jalen Tolbert's spot from him. He took Javonte Turpin's spot from him. He's been their wide receiver 3 the majority of the last 2 months. And he's actually been solid. So I will say that Ryan Flournoy is a guy that you should be keeping an eye on. If CeeDee Lamb were to miss time, Flournoy is a plug and play, sort of like a Michael Wilson type of player. Now, I don't know if it's going to be like this the next week. I can't remember off the top of my head who Dallas plays. Maybe Pickens has a better day, but one thing's for sure, Flournoy will be involved in this pass-happy offense with Dallas. So keep your eye on Ryan Flournoy. George Pickens, I will tell you this. This is not a finalized take. I always do these right after the game ends. If you're not watching it live, like this is immediately after the game ends. But I kind of sat there thinking about this, watching Pickens, particularly in the second half. And I was thinking to myself, is Pickens a true number one? Because like Pickens was the number one in Pittsburgh for a long time. And, you know, obviously I'm not saying that the Steelers helped him in any way. Like the Steelers offense is so remedial compared to every other offense in the league. So I don't blame Pickens for not ever being dominant in Pittsburgh. But I will say this, I never really thought of Pickens as a true number one. And so kind of watching him tonight without CeeDee, I know that he had a run without CeeDee Lamb, and this is kind of why I'm saying, like, it just came off the dome tonight. But my point is that, like, without CeeDee tonight, it was like they keyed in on Pickens, and he was pretty irrelevant. And when they tried to get him the ball, he was dropping passes, and he was having passes batted away from him, and he fumbled, like, close to the goal line. Now, it didn't end up, like, hurting them, but Pickens had some off plays tonight. And so I kind of just, like, had that thought creep into my head, like, is he a true number one? And, of course, that's not to suggest that you shouldn't play him when CeeDee's down. Like, obviously, if CeeDee misses a game, then Pickens is going to shoot right up my rankings to the top 3. But I will say this, like, at the same time, I think Pickens is at his best with CeeDee. I do, because you draw coverage away from Pickens. Now, again, I know Pickens did it already with an extended period of time without CeeDee Lamb earlier in the season. So I'm not saying that Pickens is garbage. Obviously not. What I'm trying to say is I'm not sure if he's best and better off by himself as opposed to when CeeDee Lamb is there. And I think the proof is kind of in the pudding tonight. Outside of that, man, Jake Ferguson, I mean, he had a critical error towards the beginning of the game. He had a fumble that totally changed the tides of the game, in my opinion. Like, you could trace it back to then, and that's when Detroit really pulled away from Dallas, is when he fumbled, and then they got a touchdown off that fumble. So, Ferguson, I mean, he just kind of is what he is, right? We've come to expect this from Ferguson a little bit. He's going to be a guy that's going to have some big spike weeks, and there's going to be weeks where he doesn't do as well, and it's not because he's not involved. Like, 7 targets tonight, that's kind of all you can ask for at the tight end position. But when you get a fumble, that's tough. That's tough, man. It takes away a lot of the points at the tight end position, right? So it's like every point matters at tight end. You can't always rely Ferguson to be a plug-and-play, high-upside guy like you can with a Trey McBride, a Brock Bowers, even a Tyler Warren. He just is not that type of guy. So then we look at the Lions side right here. Goff has a pretty solid night. For fantasy football, this is probably around 17 points, depending on your format. 309 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and obviously he's not a runner, so what you see is what you get from a fantasy perspective when he throws the ball. So I think Goff played a really good game tonight. Like, Goff, all things considered, he had pressure in his face sometimes, but a lot of times he did have a clean pocket. I do think that Goff is going to continue to be very similar to this. Like, I don't think Goff has many more, if any, 25 to 30 point games in him. I don't think that's what we're going to see. I think those days maybe aren't over, like, as far as his career goes. If they get another dominant offensive coordinator next year, that could change things. But as far as, like, his frequency of hitting big, massive games, they're not going to happen as much as they would have with Ben Johnson, right? And Ben Johnson leaving, I've been talking about this all year, is such a big loss for Detroit. And you kind of see it with Goff's fantasy numbers. Like, he just is not providing these massive spike weeks, even when they put up 44 points, right? I mean, they put up 44 points tonight, and he still didn't have, like, a 20-point game. So I just think that's kind of what you're going to get from Goff. At this point, we have to acknowledge, and this is me talking to myself, because I just ranked him as a top 5 quarterback this week. But I think we have to acknowledge that Goff probably is not a top 5 guy in any given matchup, because this matchup tonight couldn't have been better. So I do think Goff is just kind of is what he is, and I think he's a solid play in most weeks, but I do think there's going to be weeks where he's down, and the upside weeks, I don't think we're going to get many of them, if at all, this year. Dave Montgomery ends up splitting off a big run and gets in the end zone once, but you can clearly see the involvement from Dave Montgomery compared to Gibbs, and say to yourself, it's not even close. Like, Dave Montgomery, yes, gets in the end zone on one of his carries and does well. Like, most of the time he had the ball tonight, I was, like, impressed with the way he ran. But this is something I've said for a long time. Like, I said this dating back to the offseason. It is so hard for any coordinator to get 2 running backs equally as valuable. I mean, it's no better proven than looking at Chicago this year. Like, Swift and Monangai now are 2 viable options every week in fantasy. Like, that doesn't just happen. They don't grow on trees. Ben Johnson is unique. And so you take him away, and you can't utilize 2 backs at the same level of effectiveness. So Monty, good night tonight, but it's not consistent. And, like, I'm not going to have him all of a sudden ranked back inside the top 25 unless there's a bunch of injuries, right? Like, Monty is still a guy I don't trust. So if you played him, congratulations, but it's not because of me, I tell you that. And it's not that I'm saying it was a bad idea. Obviously it worked, but at the same time, like, you don't expect me to start ranking him as this really solid play as a running back. Because Gibbs, man, I mean, they can't afford, they cannot live without Gibbs. I think that they can live without Amon-Ra faster than they can live without Gibbs. Gibbs is so dominant, and this is what he can do in a fantasy football night. I mean, this is why I got irritated, because at the very end of the game, watching him score his 3rd touchdown, I was just sitting there thinking to myself, I could have had him in one of my leagues. I tried to send McCaffrey, and I think it was Brian Thomas Jr. for Jahmyr Gibbs and Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I chickened out. Like, I retracted the trade before the dude had a chance to answer. And I'm sitting here tonight watching as we entered the playoffs the first week in Week 14, which I friggin' hate. Anyone with Week 14 playoffs, change it. Change it now. Change it next year as soon as possible, because it is so stupid. Because I've got McCaffrey on that team and Travion Henderson, and they're sitting on the bench while I'm watching Jahmyr Gibbs put up 30. I mean, good. I'm glad people have him. I'm glad a lot of people in the chat right now got to experience the Jahmyr Gibbs that we all know he can be. But this is something we've been talking about for a while too. Gibbs has not been the most consistent player. He's got some Drake London in him where he's streaky, and when he's on, he can give you 30 any given week. But there's going to be games where he's going to give you 7, he's going to give you 10, and you're going to be like, what happened? Because, again, Ben Johnson is not there. That's the crux of the issue. But you just got to enjoy these nights with Gibbs. You know that he can do it for you. Jameson Williams. I ended up telling a lot of people that I would play Jameson Williams over Amon-Ra. They were basically kind of close. Like, they were basically very similar. Outcome was very similar in fantasy football. So it's not like I'm claiming that I was right in any way. They literally had basically the same night. Jameson Williams, though, I will say this, for the second straight time, not the second straight, for many weeks, since Dan Campbell took over play calling, Jameson Williams has been very involved. And there was 1 week where he goose-egged a couple weeks ago, but I kept telling people, don't worry about it too much, because what we've seen is that with good grief, with Dan Campbell calling the plays, Jameson Williams is involved, and he had 2 big plays that got wiped out by penalty in that game where he put up 0. J-Mo at this point is he's not a must start, but he's climbing towards that range for me. I think he's a really good wide receiver too right now in fantasy, with or without Amon-Ra. And with Amon-Ra, I mean, tonight kind of surprised me because I watched him. I was intently watching him tonight, and I was thinking, I'm going to see him stumble on a route. He's going to look slow. Something's not going to go right. And Amon-Ra, every time I watched him, I was like, this guy doesn't even look like he's hurt. And I will say, Amon-Ra has kind of earned a reputation so far in the NFL of being an Iron Man. Like, he doesn't miss time. He plays through injuries. He's a tough SOB. So, not surprising in that sense. But at the same time, I was like, man, I was impressed by how fast, like, he recovered from what everybody thought was going to be a high ankle sprain that would keep him out for weeks. And I don't think he needs time off. Like, you give him these 10 days in between the game, and this guy's going to be ready to go rock and roll by week 15. So, with Amon-Ra St. Brown, like, I'm fully ready for him to slice up the Steelers' defense next week. And you can continue to roll both these guys out in your lineup. Jahmyr Gibbs, like I said, obviously the guy's he's just a beast. I mean, 7 catches for 77 yards on top of the 43 rushing yards he had. The guy's an animal. You just got to enjoy it. Because the guy, like I said, I just can't help but get irritated. Because I knew I could have had him. I should have had him. I had the trade, and I retracted it like a big, fat you-know-what. Ugh, so bummer. Such a bummer. Isaac Tesla ends up getting a touchdown. So for those of you who put him in your lineup and forgot that Amon-Ra St. Brown was playing again, you actually turned out okay. He got 2 catches for 20 yards and a touchdown. Turned out all right. Tesla is only a player I would consider playing if Amon-Ra St. Brown or J-Mo were out. That's the only reason that he would be in contention for me to play him as a fantasy option in redraft leagues. Now, obviously, if you're in best ball, you got some good points out of it from a surprise candidate tonight, which is great. But this is nothing that I would consistently rely on. Like, he's done it a couple times this year, but unless we have Amon-Ra or J-Mo out of the lineup, you can't seriously consider playing him. And then I'll end on this. I see you in here tonight, Tyler, and I appreciate the super chat, and I appreciate the super chats people's patience. We'll get into those here in a second. Tyler, I want to make a public apology to you because before the game tonight and last night, you asked me if Brandon Aubrey or Fairbairn was the better play, and I said I'll play Fairbairn because I don't think Aubrey has the ceiling of 20 in him still. Brandon Aubrey kicked 50-yard field goals, 50 yards, 60 yards, 50 yards again. I mean, he had 20-plus points in fantasy. So, man, I am so sorry if you played Fairbairn because of me. That's going to be tough to replicate. I hope to God that you played Brandon Aubrey because that one's a bummer. I had long been saying Brandon Aubrey was not the same level of upside, not because of him, but because of offensive philosophy. They kicked a lot tonight. They kicked a lot. A lot of field goals were kicked, and Aubrey had a great night too. So that's the last thing that I will end on. But that's the recap. So appreciate y'all being in here. We'll knock out these super chats, and then we'll get out of here. Alias, appreciate the patience. Need a stream tight end. Top choices are Fant, Njoku, Waller, Barner, likely Loveland, and Ingram. So I will say that Njoku to me has become a clear second fiddle to Harold Fannin. So I do think that Njoku basically at this point has become kind of a basement tight end play. I'm not going to play Njoku over Waller. Waller to me is a guy that, from an upside perspective, I can tell you a situation I'm actually trying to help my wife with, but I'm still going through the motions of it, is Waller versus Gadsden in her personal lineup. And I'm actively considering putting in a Waller, and I'm not sure where I stand on it yet, but my point is that, like, out of all these guys, Waller to me offers the biggest level of upside, because the only problem I have with it is that it's in New York, and once again, I don't like Miami going to a bad weather situation, and that's what it's going to be this weekend in New York. So it bums me out from that perspective, but at the same time, Waller is their best red zone threat, and he's a consistent downfield target for them. So Waller is going to be the guy for me because I think he offers the most upside. Barner's too inconsistent, likely hasn't hit a ceiling game yet. Loveland is a good second option, and Ingram is a good third option. But to me, neither of those guys offer the level of upside that Waller does. So I'll go Waller. Appreciate the super chat. And then Tyler Sperry, will end on you. Again, appreciate your patience. Can you clear protocol by next Sunday? In theory, you can, for sure. Like, in theory, I think in theory you could clear protocol to come back in 6 days. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a player get concussed on Sunday and then play again on Thursday. I mean, I've seen it before. It's been a long time. Like, since they really made this a pressure point, a pain point for the NFL, that doesn't happen much. And so I don't think it would happen if it was that short, but obviously being 10 days, he's got a lot of time. Like, in theory, he can absolutely clear it. The question just goes back to, what do I think is going to happen? And honestly, I have no idea. Like, I can't BS you guys and say, oh yeah, he's definitely coming back. Because we've seen CJ Stroud miss 3 weeks with a concussion, right? I mean, there's been other players in previous years and previous, like, situations this year who have gotten a concussion and not come back and got put on the IR. Like, this is one of those things where you just don't know what the team is going to do with him and how they're going to handle him and how he's going to react in the protocol. Lots of things, man. And the other thing I'll say about it is the NFL, like I said, they don't want another Tua situation. And CeeDee bordered on that tonight. Like, CeeDee, I don't think people noticed, a lot of people. But CeeDee, like, briefly did the fencing thing. Like, for a second you could see it. They don't want that. The NFL, that's the last thing they want. So, I don't know. I mean, in theory, yes, he can clear the protocol by next Sunday, but I have no idea if he's going to. Appreciate the super chat. All right, we're going to go ahead and get out of here tonight. Like the video, subscribe to the channel on your way out, and join FS Roundup. Go get a start-sit poll going for free. Go vote on other polls for free tonight. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.